Thanks for those of you who've just joined us. If you haven't, you can introduce yourself in the chat box on the bottom right. We've got people from all over North America, Lebanon, Greece, joining so far, of course, Liberia. You'll also ask your questions through the chat box during the presentation, so it's a good chance to get familiar with it. If you called in, please mute your microphone. Just wait another minute or so to get all the participants who are trying to log in at the start of their day or at the end of theirs. Great, thank you all so much for joining us. We're very excited to learn about Save the Children's learning from use of mobile money in Liberia. So we'll just start by introducing today's speakers. They're going to walk us through their experience on this topic. And I just wanted to, for those of you who haven't participated in ELAN webinars before, this is a webinar series that allows us to feature new product, services, experiences from the field, and sometimes discuss different topics of interest with the community of practice interested in electronic cash transfers. You can find more resources on the CALP web pages for the Electronic Cash Transfer Learning Action Network, or ELAN. Also, a recording of this session will be made available on the CALP web pages after the event, so if you want to share it with a colleague, you can, or if you want to come back to review a point or the presentation. So thanks again for joining us. You can introduce yourself in that bottom right box as you've seen others do throughout the session. Feel free to ask your questions of the presenters as we're going along in that box as well. Just as a reminder, please keep your microphones muted. We'll handle questions through the chat box instead, particularly if you called in to today's session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Jojo is the Food Security and Livelihoods Program Manager at Save the Children International. He's based in Bong County, Liberia, and he's worked for 2 years with Save the Children and has over 15 years of experience in the humanitarian and development field. Tuan is the country team leader at Save the Children Liberia. He has over 26 years of international development experience in numerous countries in Asia and now Africa. Prior to this role, Tuan served for over 10 years as the Regional Food Security and Livelihood Advisor in Asia, gaining him extensive experience in food security and livelihoods programming and small enterprise development in a variety of settings, including post-tsunami and Nargis responses. He holds an MBA from the Henley Business School at the University of Reading in the UK. And finally, Hamilton is a co-founder and partner with Strategic Impact Advisors LLC, a small global consulting firm with expertise in digital technology's role in improving the poor's access to crucial services. He has 10 years of experience in the application of technologies across a variety of international development sectors. He has worked exclusively in the digital financial services space for 5 years with a key focus on the use of digital payments as a catalyst to and on-ramps to additional services that assist the poor. He's advised payment providers on product development for the humanitarian community and conducted research for humanitarian organizations around digital cash transfer programming. So with that, we'll hand it over to Jojo to get us kicked off. Let me just switch over the presentation.
Thank you, ladies.
Jojo can take it away.
Welcome to everyone.
Looks like we've gone one.
My name is Jojo.
Actually, right. You can either identify yourself or you can let me know.
Oh, we are very happy that you could make it to this presentation. We are happy to. Can you hear me? Okay. As I said, welcome to this presentation. We are happy that all of you could make it. to be part of this sharing of our lessons learned in using mobile money in an emergency response in Liberia. Still loading. Hello?
Jojo, you're cutting in and out. I think we've lost you for the moment.
As I said, we are happy to share our lessons learned in the implementation of... Sorry, Lily, what did you?
Go ahead.
Is it okay? Hello? Hello?
Go ahead. If we keep losing you, we'll have to ask someone else.
We are happy to share our
you.
lessons learned from implementing mobile money cash transfer in an emergency situation. Sorry? Can you hear me? I'm not. So this is our case study from Liberia. On our agenda today, what we want to share with you, we'll start with an overview of the Ebola crisis in Liberia, and then we'll move on to what led to Save the Children emergency response as a result of the Ebola crisis in Liberia. And then as a result of lessons learned, Save the Children was very keen on sharing the lessons learned from using mobile money as a response in emergency situation. So Save the Children contracted the services of Strategic Impact Advisors, SIA, to document these lessons so that it could be shared with other partners who may want to implement such a program in an emergency situation. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. The Ebola outbreak, as all of us know, started in Guinea and spread into Liberia because of the different linkages we have with Guinea. We have families across the border, both in Guinea and Liberia. So it was very easy for the Ebola to spread into Liberia because of all these linkages. So once the Ebola spread into Liberia, it moved quickly into various communities that were very close to the border and also around Monrovia. Because of some of our practices, we do a lot of handshakes. We do a lot of body touching in Liberia. So as a result of that, Ebola quickly spread among the community. And once it spread, it created a lot of problems in terms of infection rate in Liberia. So once the people were infected in Liberia, it took the effort, consolidated effort of both the host government and also the international community to be able to contain the Ebola virus disease. So once they all came together and worked together with all the support from the international community, Liberia was able to contain the virus. So finally, at the beginning of 2016, Liberia was declared Ebola-free. To contain the virus, actually, the host government, Liberian government, was forced to impose some restrictions, including restriction on movement, market activities, trade. So these activities were restricted because the government didn't want the Ebola virus to continue to spread. Next slide. As a result of these restrictions, communities were affected, whole households. Can we move on to the next slide, please? As a result of these restrictions, poor households were affected, and it became very difficult for these households to get food, to access food, and to produce food. As a result of this lack of food or inability to access food, Save the Children came in with an emergency response, which was funded by USAID Food for Peace. And the aim of the project, there were two major aims of the project. The first one was to increase access to food by these affected households, and also to increase food production in these affected households. So those were the two different aims of the program. How did we implement this program? We had a cash transfer. The cash transfer was divided into 7 different transfers. In each transfer, we transferred equivalent of $50 US to each household that was selected in both Margibi and Bong counties. In Margibi, out of the 5,000 beneficiaries that we work with, in Margibi, we have 1,500 households that we cater to, and in Bong, we have 3,500 beneficiaries. On the agricultural component, which was intended to increase food production, we had 3,200 beneficiaries in Bong County, and in Margibi, we have 800 beneficiaries. This was intended to help households produce food for themselves.
Jojo, you're coming in quite garbled. Is it possible to pass it over to Tuan? At times you're very clear, but at times it's very delayed and covering over. Hi, Tuan.
Program startup. There were a number of activities that we implemented at the design stage, the startup, and the implementation of the program. These were some of the activities. We completed feasibility studies and risk assessments prior to the selection of mobile money. That was at the design stage. Those were some of the activities that we implemented. And for us to be able to do the mobile money, which was the mechanism we decided to deliver the cash that had been selected as a modality, we decided to do mapping. We did mapping of connectivity in each of these locations. In the rural areas where we work, it was important for us to map out which areas we could do the cash out. Because for the cash out to be possible, we must have network. So we had to map out the network connectivity in each of these areas. So upon doing that, then we had a meeting with Lone Star Mobile Money for us to use their system. So a contract was signed with Lone Star Mobile Money to see how they could implement this project for us, how we could use their platform to be able to deliver the cash to these communities. So upon doing that, we had some of the options we had to be able to deliver this cash. We talked to the banks to see how they could support us. But even before that, we had talked to the bank to see whether they could help us with the delivery, but that was not possible. So then our meetings with them in this case now was to see how they could be able to help us with the needed cash on those dates that we are going to be distributing cash to these communities. Because liquidity is a problem in Liberia, so it was very important for us to agree with the bank to see how they could support us. And one of the ideas that came up in those meetings was that the bank should be informed in time for them to prepare the needed cash for the agent to take in the field to be able to pay our beneficiaries. We did all of that, had these meetings and agree on this one. And then we had meetings at different times with the agents and also with the communities, the beneficiaries, to agree on the schedule for the payment so that the agent will come and be able to do the cash out in these communities at the agreed time and on the agreed date. Next. So we had a number of challenges. As we said before at the beginning, strategic impact advisors will elaborate on some of these challenges which were documented as a way of sharing our lessons with the rest of you who have come to listen, and will be documented and also shared. But we just want to highlight a few of the challenges we had during the program. The network program in Liberia in terms of infrastructure is very limited. So you don't have network coverage in all of the areas. And that prompted the idea of having payment points, because we had to cluster all of the area of the communities into clusters for the network payment or for the connectivity. So communities had to meet at specific points where it was possible to have connection for the agent to be able to do the cash out. And Lone Star mobile money is highly centralized in Monrovia. So it's very difficult for us to address issues that come up in the communities, to address them at the level of the counties or the rural areas or the field offices. So all of the issues that came up had to be addressed at the Monrovia level. And that became very difficult because you look at the issue of reconciling beneficiary information, the use of second-hand SIM cards, and then the problem we have with the deactivation of SIM cards. Those issues had to be addressed, and the only way they could be addressed was to deal with Monrovia, which was very time-consuming, and sometimes it was not done promptly for a program to be able to do its work in time.
Sure.
Another issue we had was the reimbursement of agents, which was a big issue that we had in Liberia or in the implementation of the program. At the beginning, when we had those meetings with Lone Star, it was agreed that because of the volume of cash that was needed for the implementation of this program, it was very important for the agent to pay a certain amount of money in the field, for example, $1 million Liberian dollars, and then go back to Lone Star for reimbursement to continue subsequent payment. But this proved very cumbersome because it was very difficult for Lone Star to reimburse the agents, and that became a problem for program implementation. And this also serves as a disincentive to the agents because they put a lot of money in the program, and then getting the money out from them to be able to continue subsequent payment became an issue. So then it became very difficult for the agents to continuously pay. So we had to wait for the agents to get their reimbursement before going to pay the next group of beneficiaries. And because the agents are treated in this way by Lone Star, they have no incentive to be able to go in the rural areas to go and pay, because the commission structure that they have, the level of services that are being given them, very limited and sometimes not satisfactory. The agents are not encouraged to establish network branches or payment branches out of their shops, which are usually in the urban centers. Next. So for once the payment was scheduled and agreed, and we met with the beneficiaries, or all of the things were put in place, this is what we did. Program was responsible for organizing the batches. Save the Children was responsible to do the bulk payment, but our bulk payment was divided into batches. And these batches were done in a way that each payment point has a separate batch, which was scheduled to be paid on a particular day. So program then, after agreeing with the agents and also the communities, program processed the file that was to be used for a particular day for payment, and this one was transmitted through email to the finance office in Monrovia, Save the Children finance office in Monrovia. So Save the Children finance office in Monrovia was then responsible to do the bulk payment for that particular batch that had been agreed. So the money was then transferred to those beneficiaries that were in that particular batch. Once the money was transferred to those beneficiaries, because they are doing orientation and training with all of these people, then we started receiving calls from some of the beneficiaries. Oh, I received message on my phone. Oh, I have this message on my phone. Oh, I received my money. So once that was done, then we went through the whole organization of mobilizing them and getting everybody ready for the payment, for the agent to be able to do the payment. And then weighing these communities together with the agent, and the money was paid. Doing the payment at every payment point will ensure that the ID cards doing the payment we ensure that the ID cards were scanned. These ID cards were scanned using our digital devices. The ID cards were scanned. The ID cards were scanned and uploaded into our system to prove that these beneficiaries were paid. We also ensure that community representatives who were also there counted the money physically to ensure that the money reaching each of these beneficiaries was correct and that they didn't have mutilated bills. Because the issue of mutilated bills in Liberia is a big issue, but we didn't want beneficiaries receiving cash that they couldn't use in their communities. So we ensure that the cash was calculated and then there was no mutilated bills among them. That was the work of the committee members who were trusted people, elected in some cases, other cases appointed by their own community people to assist them. We have a number of distribution challenges. As I said, we have a very limited number of bank branches in Liberia. They are usually located in, all of them I can say are located in Monrovia. All of them are located okay. All of them are located, the bank branches are located in Monrovia. And then as a result of that, many of the branches are located in Monrovia. As a result of that, all of the people or many of the people are queuing in all of these branches. So liquidity becomes a big issue. So it was very difficult for us to get the cash on time, the cash that we needed. Sometimes it was difficult to get the cash on time. Network coverage, the number of agents are very limited in the rural areas. So it became a problem to get the number of agents needed to be able to do the work. And because the incentive package, the arrangement that is given to Lone Star agents, the amount of share, 40 and 60% share, it is very difficult for the agents to travel in the rural areas because the percentage that they get as a commission is very small. So it doesn't give them the incentive to travel from their shop to go into communities to do payment. So any organizations wanting them to do payment out of their shop will have to honor extra cost. SIA documented these challenges and they will do that presentation for us. The results achieved in the program, as we said earlier, we give $50 to each household 7 times. So we have 7 transfers spread over the number or the period of the project. So in every transfer, we give the equivalent of $50 to each of the 5,000 beneficiaries. As a result, we said that there was 35,000 transfers. The total household served was 25,129 beneficiaries. So the total amount of money infused in these communities was $1.75 million. At the moment, we are looking at our PDM data, post-distribution monitoring data, but the general trend we see is that there is a decrease in the household hunger, improvement in the household dietary diversity, and a reduction in the coping strategy index, CSI. On agricultural import, we had a very good percentage of our beneficiaries who planted the seeds that they received for the agricultural import. results. This program showed that it's possible to use mobile money as an emergency response in Liberia. We tested it and it worked. And despite the high electricity rate is very high in Liberia, but this program proves that it is possible. Once there's proper orientation and training with these communities, it is possible to do mobile money among even illiterate people and in remote communities. That was possible, as this program has proven, once there's proper orientation. As we said before, the program infused $1,750,000 US in this community. Our post-distribution monitoring data and also the monthly market price monitoring show that this amount of money did not cause market instability. It even helped to stabilize the prices of the food commodities in the local market. So now we move over to strategic impact advisors, who will take us through
thanks for that great
the next part of the
overview and
presentation, which is
introduction. My name is
findings from the
Hamilton,
research
you
done
mentioned
on
earlier,
our
and I'm
experience
with a
at
global
Save the
consulting firm called Strategic
implementing
Impact
mobile money
Advisors.
cash transfer in Liberia.
So we
Over to strategic impact
we
advisors.
worked with Save the Children to take a look at how their use of mobile money in this pretty difficult context of Liberia with their cash transfer programming, how it went, to get a couple sort of broad objectives. One was looking at the key enablers and barriers to using mobile money in a challenging context like Liberia. Another was to take a look at each stakeholder's experience through the project. So we looked at 4 different stakeholders. We looked at the Save the Children staff, so people like JoJo, the service provider, which in this case was Lone Star, the beneficiaries themselves, what their thoughts were about the user experience of mobile money, and then the agents, which JoJo touched on a little bit earlier, and we'll go into a little bit more depth moving forward. So, and additionally, some outcomes of this study are recommendations and best practices for the additional use of mobile money as a delivery mechanism. So I'd just like to also say that it was really great working with the Save the Children team in Liberia. They were very brave to take on mobile money as a delivery mechanism in a country where mobile money isn't really quite a viable product yet. So they had to do a lot of sort of make it work moments, and it was really interesting to learn about what they did and how they did in fact make it work in a tough situation. So we're going to go over kind of 3 primary broad outcomes that we saw. The report goes into a lot more detail and context about some of the key challenges that were faced and how they were overcome. But there's sort of 3 broad outcomes that we wanted to touch upon with you guys today. The first one is the importance of a banking sector. And as JoJo was referring to earlier, mobile money, especially in Liberia and more underdeveloped mobile money markets, they're oftentimes very dependent on the banking sector. So we don't usually think when we're sort of thinking about mobile money partners, we think mobile network operators, we think third-party providers in a lot of markets, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where it's mostly a mobile network operator-led models. And we don't necessarily do our due diligence around banking partners and also just how money supply is managed in general for the country, which is a mistake. Banks play a very important role, particularly in the availability of cash outside of urban areas. And so it's extremely important, and I think a very large lesson learned from Save the Children's experience, that when engaging with partners, that you have a better understanding of how the mobile money product works with the banking system in general. It's just something that's important to do and gives you a sort of broader context of the situation and how money and liquidity is managed throughout the mobile money system. So as a quick example, this is basically a graph of money supply, money reserves in the Central Bank of Liberia. When looking at sort of the overall, as you can see, reserves, the Ebola crisis had significant effects on the reserves of cash for the country at writ large. So looking at these and examining these more macroeconomic indicators should be part of the process when you're thinking about engaging with and understanding how mobile money and partners could potentially work. You could potentially work with them in your cash transfer programming. Just having an understanding of how money supply works through the central bank in Liberia. Money supply in general is not managed by the central bank. They put the onus on the banks themselves to make sure that they have cash at their branches. There's no central bank branches outside of Monrovia in Liberia. So everything really in terms of cash relies on banks. Now there are other cash reserves that are less formal in commercial context, traders, etc. That are also beneficial to take a look at in terms of understanding where cash exists from a liquidity standpoint, but also understanding where money supply, how money supply is moved around and managed by the central bank in the countries you work in is a good also first step in examining what potentially is usually one of the larger barriers to cash transfer programs, which is liquidity, as it does put a greater demand for cash than a normal sort of mobile money transaction, as you're sending lots of money to many different people in specific regions. So that's usually you're spiking demand way up for cash out and liquidity in those areas. So I'm going to actually move on to Jojo. I'm going to hand it back to Jojo to talk about agents, which was sort of one of the second broad outcomes to the findings. So Jojo, if you could discuss a little bit about Save the Children's experiences managing agents yourselves, really.
Okay, thank you, Hamilton. Okay. Lone Star has a number of mobile money super agents. We were introduced to two of them in Bon County and one in Magibi County. So they are supposed to be the ones with a little bit more cash, and they have the authority to establish sub-branches if they want to, but the incentive is not there for them to do that. So they are supposed to be managed by the point of sale, but the point of sales, because of the centralized nature of the Lone Star system, the point of sales have no power to be able to have these super agents. So everything is dependent on Monrovia. So they were not of any major help to the program because of that.
Does anyone else want to pick up on the super agents point?
Hello, can you hear?
Yeah, Jojo, we're having some trouble hearing you. Can I ask to
So by way of recommendation,
Hi, Jojo, we're having a bit of trouble here.
there's a need for Lone Star to decentralize the system at the moment, the way it is structured. In the commission structure, that goes with 60% for Lone Star and 40%
Okay, thank you,
for
Jojo.
the agents.
Your
It's not
connection's better.
an incentive to encourage them to set up.
One of the major lessons learned here is that,
Hello?
as you may be aware, that in
Hello?
similar context, in Liberia, most of the Asians
The present
are
commission?
residing in urban centers, while our target beneficiaries reside in remote and areas. So, as the system is very centralized, it's very challenging to reach out to the remote area. Similarly, the system here was set up to handle smaller number of transactions every day. So when it comes to this kind of interventions where we have typically around anywhere between 200 to 500 transactions in one county, all the transactions between the Asian and Lone Star have to go all the way back to Monrovia. So we believe that decentralization is crucial to make the system work. Similarly, Jojo mentioned briefly before that the commission structure is typically developed for the Asians not to travel out of their base of operation. Instead, mobile money users would come to their shops, their basis of operations, to do the transaction. Now that in order for us to reach out to these remote area communities, we request the mobile money agents to go out, and the current commission structure is not attractive enough, and therefore we have to develop additional structure, incentive structure to compensate their travel time. And in addition to that, we encourage them to hire additional people to join their team to go out to remote communities, and we also take that into consideration of the incentive scheme for them to pay additional people to join, so that we could speed up the cash out in the remote areas. Next, please.
Tuan, I think this is my slide. Yeah, thanks. So just one other comment on the agents. Save the Children essentially became their own super agent in this context. They were managing 2 agents in each county to basically get the money, the cash that was needed, in addition to entering into a separate agreement that had additional commissions and incentives for the agents to actually do the work. I think in Liberia, because of how underdeveloped the mobile money sector is, there isn't a very formalized master agent or super agent to agent hierarchy. So as Tuan was saying, it's just very centralized, and Save the Children basically needed to step in and fill that role, which was very time consuming, but was necessary to get the job done. So very much kudos to them. It was interesting to see how they worked the commercials on with the agents to get them to a price point that they were willing to take on the risk and the travel and the logistics of getting cash to beneficiaries. Another broad finding that we found was that the majority of beneficiaries for this program did not own mobile phones. So what Save the Children and Lone Star did is they handed out SIM cards that were registered for mobile money with the beneficiary's name, and the beneficiaries would essentially just keep the SIM cards in the little package, the yellow MCN Lone Star packaging that it came in. They would keep it under their bed, in bags. They were very careful with them because it was obviously a way that they were receiving money, but they were not really using the SIM card beyond just receiving money. It's really important to understand that mobile money in most contexts is really a value-added service for mobile network operators. It's not in any means the primary source of revenue for them. They oftentimes use it as a way to reduce what's called churn. So they're providing additional services that will incentivize customers to keep their SIM cards in the phone and not use their competitors' SIM cards, even when there's promotions on airtime and things like that. So it's key to understand that if you're using mobile money in a cash transfer program for the service provider, if it's a mobile network operator, the real incentive is sort of brand recognition and getting people to use their SIM for airtime and text and soon to be data services going down the line. So that's really one selling point that we can really see here is that 18% of those beneficiaries that did not own phones before the start of the program purchased phones during the program, specifically to store their SIM and to use it for other services, for voice and text messaging. So it's a really good way to pitch and sort of establish a stronger partnership with mobile network operators. As you can see, we broke it down by county. So in Bong, and this is another sort of concept that and recommendation that we have is when talking with mobile network operators, speaking to what you can sort of profile or segment beneficiaries that are more likely to either purchase mobile phones or to be higher sort of users of airtime and text. So in Bong, as you can see, there's only a 10% increase. Bong is a larger, poorer county with less network coverage. In Margibi, there's 40%. So 40% of the people that didn't own a phone before the program started purchased phones during the program. Margibi is closer into Monrovia, better network connectivity, a bit more commercial activities, a bit better economy. So thinking through these types of things before your program starts might be good when going to the negotiating table with providers. So open it up to questions.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thanks to all of our presenters. We've had a couple of great questions come in already. Ask additional questions if you like in that bottom right chat box. And maybe the best one to start with is the last one that came in, since it relates to the last point that you have just shared here. Since the program essentially funded NNO expansion beyond urban areas, what happened when the program ended? Was that maintained, or how might it have changed? Is there any information you guys can share on that?
At Save the Children, we are currently looking for additional resources to try to do a small pilot in exploring how possible it is to expand the Asian network and to cover remote communities by, for instance, facilitating the registration of local vendors as mobile money service provider. We have a strong confidence that if these remote communities could be connected, that would be an excellent vehicle to facilitate the local economy.
So what I would say to that is, I mean, there would have to be additional surveys as well to find out what usage is, a month, 2 months, 3 months after the program. The survey that we did was done during the last payment, the last transfer. But I think at the end of the day, the program wasn't necessarily strengthening agent networks or expanding agent networks. It was sort of making the existing agent network work for the program's needs. So there's still much to be done in terms of establishing a structured a structured way, a hierarchy for Lone Star to manage their agents and expand to more rural areas.
Great, that's really helpful, both of you. And then a couple of other questions that have already come in. One was, how did Save the Children manage potential overlaps and duplications of assistance using this mechanism? I don't know if that means with other programs or with other agencies that might be giving assistance, or how exactly, but maybe you can speak to what you considered leading to potential duplication. Go ahead.
Again, this is Tuấn from Liberia. Go ahead, Jojo.
It looks like Sarah has clarified that the question is around duplication with other agencies. So, Jojo.
Well, yeah, one of the things we did before start. One of the things that we did was we have coordination meetings in this. Yes, duplication of assistance. We have coordination meetings at the country level in these countries. So we ensure that wherever other organizations were already implementing such assistance, we are not in those communities. So those communities that were not taking over the other organizations are the communities where we work. So that's how we ensure that there was no duplication. We also work along with the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection. So they were also helpful in mapping out who was where and what they were doing to avoid duplication.
To our our registration of beneficiaries at community level, where we check with community leaders if a specific household receives similar assistance from other responders. We have at Monrovia level, we have cash transfer working group that we meet regularly to, as well as digital transfer working group that different responders, mainly international NGOs and agencies, UN, UNDP, we meet regularly to share project information coverage and including other technical approaches as well. And that is how we try to avoid overlapping each other in the country.
Great, thank you so much. We had another question come in about how long it actually took to set up the program. How long until you were able to do a distribution? Could the Save the Children team let us know a little more about that?
The short response is that it would take anywhere between 8 to 10 weeks to set it up. And what does it include? It includes essentially, on one side, we have our program team to negotiate with the mobile money service providers on official contract arrangement with mobile money agents. At the same time, our technical team is working with the mobile money service providers on to make sure that different platforms communicate properly. For instance, the GSM platform, the mobile money platform, and Save the Children is working with Segovia in setting up its own online beneficiary database, and we need to make sure that this system, as well as Kobo tablets, they talk to each other. At the same time, our field-based program team is working with the community on regular activities such as beneficiary selection.
I feel we've lost one as well.
Yeah. So in general, it would take about 8 weeks from the start of the project and the first cash transfer when it goes out.
maybe for our colleagues in Liberia, if you also have written responses that you'd want to contribute, since I'm having a lot of trouble with the audio and I'm not sure if others are as well, we could add them in the chat box instead. I have a question from a more kind of theoretical perspective for Hamilton to potentially answer, and maybe children experience was here. But I was wondering about what kinds of knowledge humanitarian agencies would need to get involved in the superagent, setting superagent commission structures. How did you, how perhaps did Save the Children work with Lone Star on this? And are we kind of in a position to make those kinds of decisions, or what kinds of information would we need in order to make them? Maybe Hamilton.
Sure. So what Save did was very practical. They sat down with a couple agents in Bong and in Margibi, and they basically costed out what it took for them to service their cash out locations. So gas, transport, hiring staff to facilitate the cash outs. They had usually 2 or 3 guys with mobile handsets, because the majority of people didn't have phones. So the process was the beneficiary would hand their SIM card and ID. The IDs would be scanned. Save did all this very digitally. As Tuan mentioned, they used Segovia as a database management platform that also helps facilitate the payment push-outs, but also managed monitoring and evaluation, the post-distribution monitoring data. And they used Kobo Toolbox on tablets to do a lot of their data collection. So it was the data that was collected was very robust and was extremely helpful in writing this report and monitoring in general the impact. But you know, they would take the SIM card, they take the battery out, put the SIM card in, turn on the phone, and then do the 6 to 7 step process to cash out. So you know, they basically put all that down on a spreadsheet. You have the 60-40 split of commission already, so you know what the potential revenue of that is, and then you match, and then you think about what those costs kind of are as indicators to the additional costs that you're going to have as an agent servicing these large cash outs. There's also the risk factor, right? These guys are going in and pulling out $10,000, $15,000, which are significant amounts of money for them and their businesses in general. Both agents were grocery store owners, right? It wasn't their primary business, mobile money agents. So taking on that risk, there's also costs to that. So that was really the process, was thinking through those costs of additional services that were needed outside of the sort of traditional scope of work of a mobile money agent, which is to have people come to you and do cash outs, to do cash in, and then on a weekly basis, maybe depending on how many transactions you're doing, go to the local sort of float liquidity management branch, whether it's a bank or in many cases for Lone Star, it's just a regional Lone Star office. To do float rebalancing. So that was kind of the process. It was extremely practical, and at the end of the day, it's just looking at costs, additional costs to what it is, and also just the logistical headaches. Keep in mind that these guys were waiting 4 to 6 hours sometimes to get cash out of bank branches. It would take them lots of time, the agents lots of time to move cash from their mobile wallets, because they had lots of e-cash, e-floats, back to they weren't able to just take it directly out. Sometimes they would have to transfer it to their bank accounts. So there was just a lot of logistical headaches for them as well that factored into the pricing.
I just want to add a couple of points here that it would also depend on the type of partnership between the Asian and it depends on the type of partnership between the mobile money service provider and their agent. That we would negotiate with the the mobile money service provider or directly with the agent. In this case, in Liberia, this partnership is very loose, and therefore we chose to work directly with the agents on this incentive scheme. Another thing we took into consideration is that this transfer is supposed to be monthly, but the first one took us over 6 weeks to achieve only 90% of the target. So we need to calculate and see what would be the optimum caseload, what would be the optimum number of beneficiaries for each of the mobile money agent to deliver cash every day for us to finish one section of cash transfer within 4 weeks. And then we develop an incentive scheme that if they reach that target, we would have additional bonus. So that was how we managed to make this, to deliver cash within 4 weeks later on.
Great, thank you so much. I want to say a huge thank you to all of our presenters and for their patience with my weak connection, and particularly to Jojo calling in all the way from Bong County and walking us through this program. Thanks for sharing your experience from this Liberia program. We'll follow up by circulating the presentation, and you will be able to find a recording on the CALP webpage of this discussion. We can also circulate a link to the report to all of those who RSVP'd for the session. So in response to your question, Richard, there's a report drafted by Strategic Impact Advisors with Save the Children that we can circulate that has a lot more detail on all of the points that were raised by our presenters here. So thank you to all of you for attending, for your patience, and especially to our presenters for making the time to share this experience with us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.